When someone you loved and cared about dies, it can be one of the most difficult experiences of life. But when someone dies, we not only lose the person, we lose many other things. Grief is like an onion. It comes in layers, and sometimes it makes you cry. There are basically two kinds of loss, which we identify as primary and secondary loss. A primary loss describes any significant loss that affects someone's life. It can be a death, a separation, or any loss that affects a change in our lives. For many of you watching, your primary loss is the death of someone you loved. A secondary loss is a loss that develops as a result or a consequence of the primary loss. One loss often leads to many subsequent losses that occur as a direct result of that first loss. It's not that secondary losses are any less important, intense, or difficult. It's just that they emerge out of or as a consequence of that primary loss. It's similar to those scenes where someone spends countless hours setting up a complex series of dominoes, and at the appropriate moment tips over the first one in the sequence. That domino tips over the second one, and so it goes one after another until they've all fallen over. When someone experiences a significant loss, such as a death or a life-threatening illness, it often triggers many other losses.
She was not only my wife, she was also the one who would tell me if my socks matched, if my tie wasn't straight, or if my hair was combed. She was able to tell me with one look if I was talking too much or saying something stupid. She was the one who would remember all the birthdays and special occasions, and all I had to do was sign cards. She was good at all the things I'm not good at. So she complimented me and made me whole.
We would have breakfast together, and look out in a beautiful garden, make plans. And we never did anything without each other. When he went, half of me was gone. That I miss his presence, his always being there, his kindness, his so understanding.
I think it took me about 6 months to really recognize how many roles she played. And it was like this little one, and then, but then that one, and by the time you add all these little ones up, it's this enormous thing that I'm saying, I can't do that.
What I miss most about my brother is always having a best friend. I basically just take it one day at a time, and I draw on other people for strength, like my mom and my boyfriend.
I would remember one particular delicious meal that she used to make. There was no recipe, because she just made it from all sorts of things she had in the fridge. I was just longing for that taste again. But try as I might, I just couldn't seem to get it right. And I'd end up throwing it in the bin. That was when I'd miss her the most.
A lady attended one of my support programs some years ago. As soon as she walked in, I could tell she was distressed. When I asked her about the loss that brought her to our group, she told me that her husband of 52 years had died. He'd gone out one Friday afternoon to do some shopping and had suffered a fatal heart attack in the grocery store. But that loss, as difficult as it was, had just been the beginning. While her husband's death represented what we might call her primary loss, in fact, she suffered many secondary losses as a result of that event. She lost the relationship that they'd shared over 52 years. Remember, we said you cannot understand what a person has lost until you understand the relationship. And here was a perfect example. They were one of those wonderful couples who'd always been close and had always done everything together. She herself had been given a life-threatening diagnosis 2 years before, and he had become her caregiver. She had been totally dependent on him. He'd done everything for her, from bringing her a cup of tea in bed in the morning, to doing the household chores, driving her to the doctor's appointments, and being her companion. So when he died, she not only lost her husband, she also lost her butler, her chef, her gardener, her housekeeper, her financial advisor, her chauffeur, her companion. We cannot fully understand what the person has lost until we understand the relationship that was shared, the things this person brought to your life and the things that you brought to theirs. But when her husband died, she lost many other things. She was not able to live alone, so her house has to be sold. Now, when you're moving from a home to a nursing home or care facility, you can't take all your furniture and your belongings with you. So one family lays claim to the dining room table and chairs. Another one wants the grandfather clock. Every day, she sees bits and pieces of her life going out the door. And the last straw comes when that daughter-in-law, whom she never really liked anyway, comes in and helps herself to the Royal Doulton figurine collection. And that is not who she wanted to have it. She's planned to give one of these pieces to each of her grandchildren, but her protests to her son are to no avail. And her husband, who would have been her advocate in such situations, is not there to defend her. Now, some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, Bill, you're not comparing the loss of a husband to the loss of a Royal Doulton figurine, are you? And the answer is no, I'm not comparing anything. What we're talking about here is dominoes. Her husband dies. She loses this relationship that she's counted on for a lifetime. She loses her house. She loses many of her possessions. She loses her Royal Doulton figurines and her plans of what she wanted to do with them. You see, sometimes it's easier to get angry about money or about possessions or about Royal Doulton figurines than it is to get angry about what we're really upset over, namely that someone has died. And she loses her independence because a power of attorney has to be signed. I remember her protesting. I can't even write a check. I can't get money out of my own bank account. Now, the family has actually done a very wise thing, because it later turned out that someone very nearly managed to con her out of a whole lot of money. So they've done the right thing, but to the lady herself, one more loss. And she loses something else that's very significant. She's a lady who's gone to church every Sunday of her life. She's had a great faith in God, and she's felt at peace in the knowledge that she might die of the illness that has affected her for several years. But when her husband dies suddenly and unexpectedly, she finds it difficult to see God's plan and God's purpose in that. Why would God take him home and leave me to make such a mess of everything? So when someone dies, the question needs to be asked, what has been lost? And so our grief guideline, we need to discover what has been lost in every situation. One night at the group, through her tears, she said, I feel like I've lost everything. Now, whether or not she's lost everything could be debated. And most of us might conclude, no, she hasn't lost everything, but listen carefully to her words. She doesn't say, I've lost everything. She says, I feel like I've lost everything. She may not have lost everything in actuality, but it feels like it. And it's understanding that feeling that enables us to support her in her situation.